Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Samuel.
Morning.
Hey, good morning. I'm happy to see you again. And even if I see just your names there, I'm happy that you are over there, anywhere in the world, connected. And hi, Cary. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. So, there's Elena. Hey, Elena, did you cut your hair?
No. I
Okay,
have a ponytail. No, I'm not cutting my hair. How are you doing?
good. Yeah, we're doing good here. Today, Hi is going back home, so it's gonna be a busy day for us today. We're gonna take her to the airport. But otherwise, the campus is, quiet. Actually, it's very pretty outside. It's very sunny.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry for those who still have snow around, but snow is good as well sometimes. um, good. Today we have a different session. Actually, I think all sessions have been different, and today is another one that is, I think, is exciting for us. We have a special guest. But I want, before we start our session today, I want to share with you that video that I showed you the other day and that I sent you by email the other day. I was just watching it this morning and I think, well, maybe it's a good thing to start the day for us. And for all those who are ending the day, maybe you had a bad day today. So maybe it's good to just go and watch it and have 5 minutes to reflect a little bit. Okay, so if you're okay, I'm gonna share the screen and then we're gonna start our session with Cary today. Let's see. Here we go. Can you see the screen, the video there? I hope so. Okay. Let me see if I can put the full screen. Yeah, let's go.
Be calm. There will be bad days. Be calm. Loosen your grip, opening each palm slowly now. Let go. Be confident. Know that now is only a moment, and that if today is as bad as it gets, understand that by tomorrow, today will have ended. Be gracious. Accept each extended hand offered to pull you back from the somewhere you cannot escape. Be diligent. Scrape the gray sky clean. Realize every dark cloud is a smokescreen meant to blind us from the truth. And the truth is, whether we see them or not, the sun and moon are still there, and always there is light. Be forthright, despite your instinct to say it's all right. I'm okay. Be honest. Say how you feel without fear or guilt, without remorse or complexity. Be lucid in your explanation. Be sterling in your repose. If you think for 1 second no one knows what you've been going through, be accepting of the fact that you are wrong, that the long-drawn and heavy breaths of despair have at times been felt by everyone, that pain is part of the human condition, and that alone makes you a legion. We hungry underdogs, we risers with dawn, we dismissers of odds, we pressers of on. We will station ourselves to the calm, we will hold ourselves to the steady. Be ready, player one. Life is gonna come at you armed with hard times and tough choices. Your voice is your weapon, your thoughts ammunition. There are no free extra men. Be aware that in the instant now passes, it exists now as then. So be a mirror, reflecting yourself back and remembering the times when you thought all of this was too hard and that you would never make it through. Remember the times you could have pressed quit, but you hit continue. Be forgiving. Living with the burden of anger is not living. Giving your focus to wrath will leave your entire self absent of what you need. Love and hate are beasts, and the one that grows is the one you feed. Be persistent. Be the weed growing through the cracks in the cement. Beautiful. Because it doesn't know it's not supposed to grow there. Be resolute. Declare what you accept as true in a way that envisions the resolve with which you accept it. If you are having a good day, be considerate. A simple smile could be the first aid kit that someone has been looking for. If you believe with absolute honesty that you're doing everything you can, do more. There will be bad days. Times when the world weighs on you for so long it leaves you looking for an easy way out. There will be moments when the drought of joy seems unending. Instances spent pretending that everything's all right when it so clearly is not. Check your blind spot. See that love is still there. Be patient. Every nightmare has a beginning, but every bad day has an end. Ignore what others have called you. I'm calling you friend. Make us comprehend the urgency of your crisis. Silence left to its own devices breeds silence, so speak and be heard. One word after the next, express yourself and put your life into context. You find that no one is listening. Be loud. Make noise. Stand in poise and be open. Hope in these situations is not enough, and you will need someone to lean on. In the unlikely event that you have no one, look again. Everyone is blessed with the ability to listen. The deaf will hear you with their eyes. The blind will see you with their hands. Let your heart fill their newsstands. Let them read all about it. Admit to the bad days, the impossible nights. Listen to the insights of those who have been there but have come back. They'll tell you. You can stack misery, you can pack despair, you can even wear your sorrow. But come tomorrow, you must change your clothes. Everyone knows pain. We are not meant to carry it forever. We were never meant to hold it so closely, so be certain in the belief that what pain belongs to now will belong soon to then. That when someone asks you, how was your day? Realize that for some of us, it's the only way we know how to say, be calm. Loosen your grip, opening each palm slowly now. Let go.
Okay, we can take a deep breath. So we are connected even if we are just in front of a computer. I was thinking the other day how awkward it would be just to see each other looking at a computer, but we are looking at each other actually. So yeah, today we are gonna have a session more related with your IAs as I send you by email. Cary has been in touch with us, well, with me, and he offered very kindly to be again sharing with us. You have met Cary because he was here in December, remember, in last year, and he was actually joining one of the, the session that we have with the games that you made, and he teaches global politics. So he knows a lot about the course, and my intention is that we, at the end of today's session, you have already a topic that you can start working or at least an idea of your topic so you can start working on your IA as we are wrapping up for our summer break, okay? So Cary, I'm gonna give it to you to just run the session, and then we still have one session next week, guys, so we're gonna talk next week about what to expect for the summer and what, just to closing up our semester, okay? So Cary, all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hang on. This might be easier if I do that. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Sam. Okay, you have to do an engagement activity, and that sounds either really exciting or not really, depending on what you're doing. But you're trying to look for two things. Yeah, you're trying to look for two things. The first is this something political that has a political connection that you know about, that you can understand, that you can tie back to the course? That part of it may be a lot easier for some of you to do. Everything is political, so that might not be a big problem. And then the second part is the engagement side of it, and the thing that you can do that is political. And for some of you, that might be a lot easier to do, again, depending on what you're looking at, because again, everything is political. So either you have something that you want to study, which you can probably connect to the course, or you have something that you want to do, or you are going to do anyway, that you want to connect with the course. And if you have one of these two things, or something in one of these two things, it's going to make your life a little easier. It is designed to be a convenient exercise. It's usually done in the summer. It doesn't have to be something extreme this year. It probably will not include a lot of physically present activity because of all the stuff that's happening. But you can still do something political, and you can still study a political issue. And that's kind of the first bit that you kind of have to think about. I guess you would have had some ideas or heard about some of the engagement activities that your now seniors, second years have done. Does that help you with what you might want to do? Does anyone have an idea that they think, yeah, this might work? I'm not sure. Kind of have a question either on a topic they want to study, or a thing that they want to do, or we're going to do anyway. And right now is just a good time to just, hey, I have this idea. Would that work? This be interesting? And then we'll go through the rest of it. Jump in. Any ideas?
My idea that I have was, I haven't formulated the question yet, but was something about investigate whether in Colombia, when there is corruption in the democracy, if we still can call a democracy Colombia, or if it's a weak state or a fragile state. So that would be the exploration about.
Okay, yeah, sure, that could work. That is a very big topic, and if that is not what you're thinking about, you do not have to do that. Just some ideas like off the top of my head, and we'll go into how to structure this in a bit. Your issue is political legitimacy in the face of corruption. Is that still a thing? So that's your issue: corruption, legitimacy, failed state, sovereignty. And then your engagement activity, your activities could be lots of things. It could be working with local government. It could be working with national government if you have access to the national government. Great. It could be talking to anyone around you, because your voting population is going to be always present. And if you can meet with a community group or an NGO group, then that would be a question. Hey, these are some things that I think are necessary for a legitimate representative democracy. In your opinion, as an NGO group, as a watchdog, is this still happening? Is this happening enough? Would this be, am I asking for too much for democracy? Am I asking for too little? Is there something else that I'm missing? That's basically the idea. But you have this big idea about legitimacy, democracy, representation, which is solid. The second part is to find something that is accessible, especially now, that you can do. In another year, maybe you'd go and shadow a government watchdog or the political ombudsman. You probably won't do that this year. But you can still have interviews, you can still set up calls, you can still run surveys, you can do focus group interviews like this. I mean, this is 20 people on a call. This is an easy way to do a bigger group. You can just do one-on-one conversations and record them. So that is one way to do it. Pick an issue, doesn't matter how big. We can find a reasonable activity that you can accomplish in the 2 months, the 3 months that you have for your break. You don't have to pick something as heavy as Is my country a failed state? That is not something you have to do. Again, everything that you're doing is political. But yeah, thank you, that works. Definitely something that you could get into, and we're getting into some details in a bit. Any other ideas? Issue? Activity?
Yeah, I kind of have. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go, Maha, if you want.
It's okay. You can go. I can wait. It's okay.
I wanted to explore the concept of failed state and in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just an idea. And the other second idea I had is to explore the concept of sovereignty and how the Venezuelan regime has used it to maintain an authoritarian government or like autocratic government.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. Both of those are valid. They would definitely work. There is a political issue. There is a problem that you could look at. You definitely have stakeholders. It's clearly related to politics. Again, I'd probably think about the engagement side of it in a similar fashion. You're gonna come up with some concept that you think captures the idea. What are the core features of government? And you're gonna find some group, some body, some organization to have this conversation with. And again, this is probably gonna be interviews. One place that is usually interesting to do, depending on how you arrange your politics, is if you can talk to a reporter or a journalist in your country, then that's a really good place to get some feedback, because they already have a lot of contacts, they already have a lot of opinions from both sides of it, and you will be doing this, approaching this from multiple perspectives. Again, if you can't, then trying to find your local government representative from the opposition party is another good way to get a non-government, non-administration opinion of what's happening. Yeah, it's obviously going to be tinted by political agendas, but that's fine, because you know what you're getting and you know you need to get multiple perspectives. So that really won't be a problem, because you're looking at it pretty much from the start. So that should be easy. But yeah, same issue, you've got a problem, and now the activity is probably gonna be interviews that come from a research process that you've designed when you have some sort of conceptualization, when you have defined what these terms mean and what is included in that idea. Does that make sense? Okay. There was someone just like a second ago and I've lost you. Yes.
My idea is kind of broad, but I thought it was really interesting. I'm from Morocco, and I thought it was really interesting to explore migration, because it's a place that people migrate to and migrate from, and that Moroccan, so like it's a pretty interesting to its location or whatever. I don't know how much you know about Morocco, but I thought, I don't have a research question, and I know it's kind of broad, but yeah, that was just my take.
That's fine. And most of you are going to be exactly where you are, where you have a thing that's interesting and you're not sure what to do with it. For something, for you, for your starting point, one of the things that I would try to do is get in touch, just talk to your parents or anyone really just around who has an opinion that they're willing to share. It's easy to do this with family members because they're willing to talk to you and they can just talk. For some of this, you're gonna have to set up an interview, you're gonna have to organize meetings with someone to do this stuff. To make that process a little easier, it's gonna help you if you do a pre-interview. If you do sort of a dry interview without anyone, without rush, without pressure, without a lot of stress. And essentially you just have the same questions that you were gonna ask one of the stakeholders that you want to talk to about migration to, migration from, doesn't matter. And just run through those things. And what you're listening for in that pre-interview with anyone is, when does it get interesting? When does the subject, the person you're interviewing, when do they get excited? Or when do they get bored? Or when do they change the topic? Those points are the points that you might want to think about designing your questions around. Hey, I want to talk to you about migration. What's interesting about migration? What do you think about migration in Morocco? At some point, they're going to start talking about something that you didn't think about, and that might be really interesting. And that might give you an angle that you can either narrow down your research or completely change the direction of your research, which might make it easier. So don't worry about if you don't have a specific thing just yet. Right now, if you have something that's interesting to you, that's going to help. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Remember that you have total 2,000 words to do this. So you're going to be using about 500 of those words to just look at the introduction to the political issue and the conclusion, which means you don't really have that much to really get into the analysis, to get into what's going back and forth. So you're going to have to, from your big issue, all of you, you're going to have to narrow this down into something that's interesting for you, because you're going to have to write it, and for whoever you're working with, because they're going to have to talk to you about it. But it's going to be pretty limited in terms of what you can do. So it's not really a big thing. It's more of an interesting journey that you get to go on. It's one of the places where the IB gives you space to do fun things. But it's not as big as you think, but it's going to take a lot more work than you think. And the idea behind it is, in terms of planning, this is going to look like a paper 2. It's going to have the same need for arguments, for concepts, for multiple perspectives, for accuracy and use of data. And the idea is that if you do HL, you're going to do 2 presentations on a political issue that you're going to choose. And then you're going to do an engagement activity. So that will mean that whatever happens, you're going to have 3 case studies that will connect to multiple parts of the course that you can use for any 3 paper 2 questions that come up next year in the exam. That's basically the idea. So the course is kind of designed to help you as you keep doing the course. And if you're doing SL, then you'll definitely have your engagement activity, which is going to be one of your 2 paper 2 questions that you're going to be doing next year in May. And again, the engagement activity and the presentations, if you do those, are each going to connect to multiple parts of the course. So you'll get that richness and that fullness, which should make it easy to, if you completely freeze and you can't think of any case studies, and you just can't put an example together, I promise that some of this will come back and be useful. Or maybe it won't, you won't need it, but that's the idea. So get an interesting topic that will stick with you, that will be useful as you keep studying. And as you keep putting more units together, you'll realize, oh wait, that thing I did on migration is also related to development and also related to human rights and also development. That's the idea, right?
I want to jump in with one thing here. Maybe one thing is that, and I saw your hand, Hera. Joe, after me, you can go with your question. Just think about what drove you to be studying global politics. Maybe you have that idea in your head and you forgot about that, but now it can come back to you because that was maybe the driver. That's why you wanted to study global politics. Just listening to Cary, that's what came to my mind. And another thing I just want to encourage you is to work as much as possible during the summer with this, because if you leave it for later, because you still have a lot of time once you come back as a second year to work on that. But the thing is that you still have to work on your EEs, and then you will have to work for your university applications and examinations and all of that things that are going to happen next term. And you don't want to fill in with a lot of stuff once you come back. So the sooner you start with this and you finish this, the better. Even if you don't finish it completely, at least you will have almost 100%, let's say, hopefully, when you come back in September. So that's why I encourage you to actually ask any questions and try to start working as soon as possible so you get that out of the way. Kara, go ahead.
Thank you. So I had a few topics, but I kind of narrowed them down and I made some questions. So I was thinking of one: to which extent should the Jamaican government be allowed to intervene in the continual operation of local private-owned industries when faced with a global pandemic? And I was thinking of another one: how does inequality in income distribution drive the continuously rising crime rate? So I was wondering what you thought about those.
Yeah. Yes. One, you're going to do this, you're going to translate that big issue, that political issue that you have, into a question that you can answer. So the questions are great. That's wonderful. And they work. Again, one of the things you're going to have to decide is how to measure your issue. Who are you going to talk to about this? Currently we have, so again, looking at what's happening, you don't need, if whatever your issue is, the engagement that you do is going to be fine if it is convenient. If you happen to be connected with someone at a national state level, then go for it. Get that, have that interview, let that be the place you go. If not, then have it be local government, have it be neighborhood, have it be something local that you can access, and that's fine. So your issue is, how do you evaluate whether the state is doing the right thing? Are you interviewing business owners and members of the community in that way? Are you interviewing clients? Are you interviewing local government or national government? So once you think about which of those places you have access to, then you can move on to the next step and try to figure out what you'd ask if you'd ask different organizations, different stakeholders, different questions. Is your relation with the state and the government going to be the same as your conversation with the market and business owners? Is it going to be different from citizens, clients, and voters? Is that going to be the same conversation when you talk to three of those groups? And that's really your issue. But yeah, the questions sound good. That sounds fine. Yeah, now it's just designing it, getting some theoretical context to it. Development comes up, sovereignty, legitimacy, human rights, conflict, all of the units connect to it. So you're basically deciding how you want to focus your question to get the answer that is most useful to you. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Rupita, go ahead.
Thank you, Samuel. Hey, Cary, I'm Rupita. I'm from Bangladesh. And my question, I have two questions. The first one would be more about the IB engagement section in itself. So what is IB looking forward to when it says we have to engage with our IA in some way? So what's the best way to utilize this section of our IA? And what ideas should we have prior to carrying out the engagement activity? And how do we carry it out in a pandemic right now? So what are some of the tools, because it's an extraordinary situation? And my second one would be, I had an idea. I know what I want to do my IA on. It has to be something around the Rohingya refugee crisis, because that's something our country has been involved with for quite a long time now. And I have two specific approaches to the problem. The first one would be the question of identity for the Rohingya refugee in the upcoming or the recent future or the near future, because these are essentially stateless people now, because they are not being recognized and we are not reaching anywhere with them. And another idea I had for them was the question of involvement of international bodies or non-governmental organizations in uplifting the standard of living or improving the future for the Rohingya refugees. So yeah, that was a mouthful, but
okay, no, that's fine. First issue about how you do it, how you go about this stuff. A lot of it's going to look like this, honestly, just depending on who you're doing this with. The idea, again, is supposed to be somewhat convenient, so local, connected with you doing something. Some of my students they've worked at a newspaper and they've worked on a farm. Traditional technologies make things different. Someone took a year-long course and was just gauging the opinions of her peers in the course. All that stuff's really exciting, but it requires a lot of planning, and it also requires a lot of mobility. Not many of us will have that mobility over the summer, so that's fine. You'll still have your conversations. Whoever you are going to interview in person, in a meeting, in a building, in someone's head office, you'll do it like this. Or you're going to do it just by typing it out and just going on Instant Messenger, whichever platform you use. That's fine. That's what it's going to be. And everyone is going to be doing the same thing. Ideally, you'd be able to do something in person and try to do that richness like that, but we won't, and that's okay. That's something we're going to have to do differently this year, and that's fine. So that's not an issue. You're not going to be, your entire year group in every school in the world isn't going to be punished or disadvantaged because they, can't go and meet people and have this really long discussion over coffee. That's fine. I don't think you have to worry about that. But it's really just about making sure that these interactions, whether they be one-on-one, which is easy, all of you before class started and after class is over are going to go back on Messenger or like the thing with the dances, clock. What's that thing?
TikTok.
That's fun. Yes. You're all going to go on TikTok.
I don't have it.
I
don't have it on my phone.
So, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you know what it is. So, and that's not a problem, but you still find ways to connect with each other, and that connection is rich and deep and meaningful, and you can convey lots of information. So we're just gonna use that, maybe not TikTok, maybe, I don't know. But you can still use that technology and still have that richness of communication and share those ideas. Again, sometimes you would love to have a large group of people together working on something. You can fit 48 people in a Zoom meeting, and whether that just be like a yes or no show of hands issue, and you can do something like that where everyone works with each other, that would be just as effective in any case. So don't worry about not being able to do it, because you still will. So that's fine. Does that help relieve a little bit of anxiety for anyone? Kind of almost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. So that part's fine. Don't worry about that. So it's looking for an engagement, and your engagement is coming back to this idea of, I have this political issue, and I personally did this thing to connect with it. I did it. I now today can do a political activity that has meaning, that has richness, that is interesting for me, and that's fine. That's what we're looking for. Going back to your issue again, and it seems like you have a good understanding of what it is that you want to look at. So I think for most of you, and we'll do, Sam, you're going to help me find a way to like split into two in a second, but you have an issue that you definitely want to do, and that's great. So now we need to figure out, how do we check whether this is happening? Do you live near Cox's Bazaar? Is that a place?
That was supposed to be my EHS, but now I can't go. I live in Dhaka, so
okay. And that's fine. That's one of the things that we're all going to have to adjust to. you don't have to be in the middle of a refugee camp to take care of these issues. And again, that's a phone call. There are people working there. You have public relations teams across the board. For every part of the UN system, there's a public relations office in your country. You can call them up and they will make time for you. Will they do it tomorrow? Probably not. But if you call them and if you write them, you can set that up. And that's not a problem. They'll be able to do that. And if they can't, they'll send you to someone who can. So you'll always be able to get the information. And what your job, what the fun part is if you get that official position from, High Commissioner for Refugees, then you also need to get another perspective, always have multiple perspectives, from some connection with the state, the receiving state, the host country. Is there anyone you think that has an interesting opinion about receiving a population in trouble? Because at some point, you're not just receiving refugees, you're going to be integrating people into a country and a culture which is different from theirs. Yes, we have a shared religion, but there's more to life, there's more to cultural context. So it's making sure that you have enough voices in your exploration, in your activity, to make it richer. Does that idea make sense?
Yeah, but since we won't have much space or enough words to include everything, so how do you suggest we go about?
We're going to make it really narrow. We're going to make that question really narrow. So the research that you do, you probably won't use all of it. You're going to have a lot of information in your conversations, and you're just trying to narrow it down to something really specific. So even if you have those questions, you're still going to adjust it as you keep reading, as you keep researching, as you keep meeting. So that's not, you'll run out of words if your question's too broad. If your question's too broad, it's going to be too hard to answer. So you'll be able to, there's some immediate feedback there either way. Yeah.
And you suggested that I reach out to an organization that has been working on the field and on the spot with those refugees. So does it have to be a recognized organization such as UN, or can it be another recognized organization? For example,
any organization, absolutely. Doesn't have to be the UN. It's supposed to be someone that you can connect with and you can work with. You doing it is the most important part of this.
Yes. Thank you so much, Cary. That helped relieve a lot of stress.
Cool. Question. Does anyone, so far, there have been a lot of really good ideas of people who have a really good concept that they want to explore. We can also start from the other direction. Is there anyone who is going to do something this summer, had planned to do something this summer, and wanted to connect it with their engagement activity? Were you doing a summer camp? Were you already going to do an internship? Do you have a summer job? Do you want to connect that thing that you are already doing to this, but you're not sure how to do it? Does a family member do an interesting job? Also fine. All right.
My dad's in law enforcement. I don't know if that adds to.
No, doesn't help me. I am beyond help. Don't worry about it. But if you have a connection with an interesting thing, or a thing that you are already going to do, anyone at all, doesn't matter. Then if we're going to do that, so a couple of students last year were going to work on a Sino-Japan summer camp. The thing that happens every year, they were already going to do it, and we managed to design an activity around that summer camp, looking back at conflict, looking back at human rights, looking back at just this idea of sovereignty and changing ideas. If you are already going to do an interesting thing, or if you are planning to do something interesting anyway, especially with what's happening now, then we could do some reverse engineering and get you back to an engagement activity if you are doing something like that. So you've got options in terms of how you want to design your issue. And if you don't, totally fine.
Yeah, and actually I just want to jump in because we have what we call the extended home service, which I don't think is happening this term as it was happening before. I think there are different criteria right now, but if you haven't received any information, you will receive. But that's also linked with what you can do during the summer, and maybe you can link it with your engagement, isn't it, Cary?
Yeah, yes, that's the idea. Like, that's a great way to do it, and we can pull that back, and there's so many political issues connected to that.
I'm helping organize a virtual conference about plastic pollution, and
Yes.
a lot of people who are it's for youth, and a lot of people there are people who have worked to change policies in their countries about plastic pollution and single-use plastics. But if I'm already doing my EE on plastic policies for the ocean, is that too similar?
I think, Sam, that sounds similar to me. And I guess if you get into the details of it, there's probably a way to separate it out. But I would probably do something different just because it would be interesting for me. But that's essentially it. If you're gonna do that conference and you weren't gonna do it on your extended essay, weren't gonna connect it to your extended essay, then you could do something like that. One question that you could do, which I think might be possible, would be, how do you organize a conference today? How does online participation change conference dynamics? How does it change the way we share? It's the same people with the same minds and the same energy and the same love for the subject, but those meetings are going to feel different. And one of your engagements, one of your activities to demonstrate that this is or isn't happening could be the conference, for example. I don't know. But that's one of the questions that you could ask, which, yeah, you'd have to get really detailed to make sure that you're not double dipping, but that's the idea. Yeah, if you're going to do something already, we could change it into an engagement activity.
Yeah, maybe what I think is that Linnea, you are working on your E, researching something related with the plastics, but it's not necessarily the conference, isn't it?
No, it's on jurisdictions of the ocean and whose problem is the plastic pollution.
Sure.
So conferences on changing policies in different countries.
So the content of the conference will help you for your EE, but actually the conference itself, as Cary was mentioning, that could be another venue to explore in your engagement activity, talking about what does it mean to, let's say, engage people from all over the world into this topic. And again, I think it's a political issue, because what drives people to engage, even if we're having these restrictions of engaging, why people would like to talk right now about plastic pollution and not anymore, or maybe they still want to talk about the health issues. So all of these questions could be related with your engagement while you are doing the conference. So I think the conference is a good venue to explore and a good excuse to explore as per your engagement activity.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Maggie, and I was wondering about one idea, and it's connected with an issue why there are so low levels of participation of youth in voting process, so in voting of election of parliament in my country. And I was thinking about comparing it to, for example, with country of possible reasons. One of the reasons would be that in my country we don't have global politics as a science, as a part of educational program, and comparing with a country and how statistics shows the levels of participation in the country where global science is part of the program. And my activity would be interviewing just people and asking for their reasons why they are not participating or why they choose to participate and what are the reasons.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. That's just good. One of the things I would try to do just in terms of getting, if you're going to do something like that, trying to get the perspectives in my head, that's where I usually go with these responses, is if you have some students, if you have teachers, again, if you have parents, if there's some local government that's present, whatever those things are, if you have different voices, then it makes that a lot easier. It doesn't have to be in terms of numbers, just making sure that they're approaching this issue from different ideas, or, you know, student youth group 1, youth group 2 that has a very different position works just as well, just as long as you have different different ideas for getting this stuff together. But yeah, that sounds like a great question and sounds like you have a target. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yep. One of the things that I sort of the first thing, your engagement activity is graded on 4 criteria. The first is your identification of the issue. Is this something worth studying? It usually is. That's pretty fine. And the second one is the description of the engagement, actually talking about what you did and how that worked. Both of those are worth 4 marks. The identification of the issue, 4 marks, and how you look at the description of what you're doing is worth another 4 marks. So if you can knock out both of those really well and be very clear, then that is 8 out of 20 marks for the entire thing, and that guarantees that you have a pretty good grade. Even if the rest of it falls apart or you get lost in the analysis, that's already good. One of the things that you're going to, it's just a question and it's one question, it's going to sound like a lot, but after you describe what you did, I interviewed these people, I did this survey, I attended this conference, explain why. Why did you do this? Why do you think this activity helps you answer the question? Why do you think this activity helps you to understand this political issue? That's pretty easy to do. Well, it's easier to do than the second part of the question, which is, if you interviewed these people, if you did this activity, if you went to this place, why did you choose to not do something else? And you don't have to make this stuff up. You don't have to pretend there's some deeper reason for it. It could simply be an honest, I wanted to connect with Samuel because he knows a lot about politics, but we couldn't meet because of movement restrictions and telecoms was tough. There was a hurricane, we lost communication, whatever. I had 2 interview subjects and my engagement activity is going to be these 2 things. I wanted to have a third subject to give balance and to bring another perspective, but I couldn't. I wanted to interview another candidate for elections, but they didn't get back to me and the first 2 candidates did. I wanted to make this richer by attending another conference, but registration was closed when I tried to do it, or something like that. So it's, why are you doing it? What is easy? That's fine. That's your first 2 out of the 4 marks. Give yourself the second 2 of 4 marks. Why did you do it? And why did you not do something else? You don't have to make it up. It can be very honest and, hey, I tried to, looking back at the end, after doing all my research, I think I probably could have added another person. I could have added another activity. I could have spent some more time. I could have asked some more questions, but I didn't. I didn't think about it. I didn't have the time. That's valid. That helps give a richness to your description of your engagement. Does that idea make sense? Because those are just get the easy stuff fully, like get all your marks for the easy stuff. What are you doing? Fine. Why are you doing it? Why did you not do something else? You can all take care of that even before you start writing, before you start analyzing. That's where you are. All right. And you can be honest about it. There is some convenience there. That's fine. I have access to these interview subjects and I connected with them. Didn't have access to these interview subjects. I couldn't connect. This is what I have. So think about.
This is very helpful, Cary, because I just want to maybe point out that the IB wants us to have all this open-mindedness and not just focusing on one thing. The IB does not want us to be dogmatic. That's one of the things. They don't want us to say, well, this is the only way of looking at a problem. But the IB wants you to tell the IB that you understand that there's a bigger problem and the movie is bigger. Even if you didn't approach this other side, what Cary is saying is, I didn't approach this other side, but I'm aware that this other side exists and up exists and down exists, but I'm focusing just on this because I have an argument why I didn't do it the other side, but I understand it. As long as you are evidence at that, I think that's what Cary is portraying here, that the IB rewards that because he's telling the IB, I have a critical mind, I have an open-mindedness, I'm not just focusing on what I want to focus and that's it, and I forget about the rest of the reality. So thank you, Cary.
Yep. Okay, so let's do some drilling. We have about half an hour.
Yeah. Actually, we end the classes before the 2 hours. We have technically 2 hours, but we can use half an hour more. So
no, I have all the time in the world. This is This is the fun part. So if I'm looking at, I'm just looking at give me a second. I have too many things open. And yes. Okay. So who let's just try to run through, and I think was spoken to okay, yep. Who doesn't totally safe space? This is great. Everyone is pretty much the same boat. Don't worry about it. Who no idea what they're doing. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to talk about. I don't know what this guy's taught. What is it? Help. Like, this is a fun place to do it. Let's just go.
They want people to say it, or maybe they want to write it on the chat.
We could write it in the chat and we could start throwing some ideas around. Either way is fine. Like, let's do it in the chat. That would work. Just not really sure. This was fun. I was thinking about this, but now Corona, can't do it. Like, we could change some ideas. We could adapt some ideas. Give me a country. I could probably try to figure out some stuff that might be interesting. Yeah, go for it.
Well, like, the thing is that I was thinking about many problems, but I don't really know how to like choose one exactly. For example, I had in mind poverty, gender inequalities, but like I haven't really like set a time to think, okay, this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to do it. So my ideas are kind of vague regarding that. That's okay.
No, that's fine. Are you worried about not having a topic so far?
Right now, not really, but probably like in a couple of weeks I will be starting to get worried. So.
All right. Just some ideas which are make life easy and are also very possible today in what we're doing. Everyone's country is trying to provide some amount of financial support or economic support, debt relief, payment relief, payment restructuring. Everyone's country is trying to do something about that. Some countries just handing out cash. Some countries are canceling bills, depending on where you are. If you're looking at things like gender and poverty, if you think the pandemic is interesting, you might want to look at something like that. What's happening? How are you doing this? Do you think this would be effective? Would someone think it's effective? I live in Japan, and we have waited a very long time to deliver money. We're gonna hand out about 1,000 Canadian dollars to every resident in the country. And there are two things that are really interesting about that. And this comes from waiting a very long time. Waiting a very long time comes with a lot of political backlash. And people are very unhappy with the pace of this and the speed at which it has been happening. Technically, we have had an issue. We've been responding to this since January of this year. It's now June. Not every country has had cases for that long. The first issue that came up, which was really interesting and very clear, is that in every description of this process, there is always a note: if you are, or if you know someone who is in a relationship that will make the receipt of these funds difficult, then contact this number yourself or contact this number for them. Administratively, the way that we're going to do this is we're going to give it to whatever the designated head of the household is. That does not have to be a male head of the household. But domestic violence is real, and intimate partner violence is real. So if your partner is on paper the head of your household and you have an abusive relationship, you've probably already left, or you probably don't want to stay, but you probably do need these funds to continue living. So the state has decided to make that very clear and very obvious in every communication. So there's minimized risk of people compromising their safety for their financial well-being. That's something that not a lot of countries have been very explicit about, that have been trying to do this by delivering money to people. What do you do with that? That's one issue. The other issue is how do you go about doing something like this? And you can talk to Samuel about this. He can give you much more information. But is it better to introduce cash and give you money, or is it better to stop bills? What would be better? You don't pay taxes, you don't pay for services, or you get money. What's actually better for human development, for economic development, for well-being? I don't know. And this is going to be different depending on your context. But if you're looking at issues of poverty or gender equality, or if you think the pandemic's an interesting idea, some of those issues might be something that you think about. And every country will have something. And in terms of connecting with people, that would be fairly easy. Do you think this will work? Has it worked for you? What would be the problems that you see happening? And you could do this in multiple different contexts. Would it be different in an urban area? Would it be different in a rural area? Would it be different if you have larger family sizes, smaller family sizes? All of these things would be interesting ideas to go with, if that's something that's interesting for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Does it have to be something that's affecting your country right now? Or can it be something that like if you know somebody who worked on something that happened 15 years ago, and you know people who like worked on both sides in the government doing that? Can you
totally
talk about that?
Yeah, as long as you can you can do something with the issue now. The issue doesn't have to be current. Your participation in the issue has to be current. I wanted to look at the effect of this decision on people that it affected. One of my students looked at the Marshall Islands and the US have a relationship because of nuclear testing in the atolls. That's been happening for a very long time. And essentially the study was looking at the persons administering the Compact of Free Association. That's been happening for about 30 years, but just looking at what the last 15 years, the last 2 compacts have been like. So that's also fine. It's within the recency of the course, and you would be interviewing them, you would be trying to understand what happened. That is totally fine. Someone else looked at why it took so long to create a memorial for a, we're not getting into that. It's just, it took a very long time for the government to create a memorial. Why did it take so long? And they were just looking at survivors and what their recent pathway has been, and recent being 10 years ago. That was when the thing was created. So yeah, that's also fine. You just need to do the thing now. But you could ask the question about a historic event. Not historic, but like recent historic. Like, you know.
So like how far back can it be?
The guideline is within your lifetime. So 20 years.
Okay.
It's kind of the arbitrary cutoff. That's the cutoff I use, 20 years. 18, 20 years, which means if you want to get really excited about stuff and you're a politics geek, technically, depending on how you look at it, your first years that come in September, they will not be able to use 9/11 as a case study anymore because it's not current. How's that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're getting old. But yeah, that's it's within your lifetime. That's where you want something to be. And that within your lifetime gets to be a little bit tricky. The genocide in Rwanda happened more than 20 years ago, but the tribunal looking at the genocide ended in the past 20 years. So you can look at the tribunal as a response, as a conflict resolution measure, and because you're talking about the tribunal, you're allowed to talk about the actual event. So there's some finicking stuff that you can do there, but yeah.
So if this is something that happened more than 20 years ago, could I look at the effect of it now on the community, so that I could talk to people who were involved in the decision making then, but then also people who are being affected by it now, like the business people and stuff like that.
This thing is affecting us today.
Yeah.
Not the thing, but the effect of it is what you're looking at. Yeah. By talking about the effect, the thing will come up. Yeah, that's fine.
And can you explore something, for example, 5 years ago, and not explore the effects about today, just what happened 5 years ago, and that's it?
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you're having the conversation today, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Maha?
Yeah, I had a question concerning what if our topic is linked with a part of the syllabus that we haven't done in class yet? How do we do?
You're going to read about that issue in a textbook or online. That's what I would do.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
What are the other parts of this? Because we did sovereignty and development, so the other ones are human rights and...
Then the other 2 you're going to be looking at are peace and conflict and development.
Human rights.
Human rights, peace and conflict, development, and then power, sovereignty, and international relations. Peace and conflict, human rights, and development are the other 3.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can listen. You're smarter than Samuel and I put together. We're not trying to pretend like you can't learn this stuff by yourself. I don't want you to know everything about development, but come on, man. It's like, just look inside the internet. I promise you it's there. We can give you like a short reading list for this stuff if you want to just have a starting point. But what you will be missing if you try to approach that issue without doing it in class is you might miss some of the major theories, some of the key concepts, but you'll still have the idea and you'll still have an understanding of what's happening. So when you get back in September, then you'll see the concepts that will represent the arguments that you were trying to make. So you'll save some words and you'll be able to integrate some more theory into it. So that's not a problem. But like we can give you a short reading list that you can like just read or watch or listen to podcasts, so you can get an introduction to a lot of what you're doing. And Sam and I will work on that.
Thank you, Cary. And maybe I want to add that also that if you just check the syllabus, you have a copy of the syllabus, and there's also resources online regarding the IB syllabus of global politics. Then my suggestion is that if you go to the topics of human rights, what are the subtopics, and then you can just research by yourself again. As Cary was saying, I don't doubt that you will be actually getting what otherwise you will get in a class anyways. So trying to use this time also to self-studying. This is actually something that is not political correct to say as teachers, but I think it's true. You can actually learn by yourself without the need of a teacher. But what we try to do is just try to put the ideas into a particular structure so you can follow up sort of some theoretical background or structure. But still, don't be shy to believe that you can actually learn by yourself when you start searching other resources. The important thing is not to go to these fake news things and to shallow resources, but I think there's lots of bibliography out there in the web that you can actually look at. And I also saw Giovanni's hand, unless there's something else you want to add, Cary.
Yeah, Cary, I just wanted to ask you if there is a way, or if there is any format that we can base, like, to write the essay, because I'm seeing that we have a lot to say and we have to explain the way that we are gonna like connect with people. So like, yeah, is there in any format to write the essay or anything?
Yeah, the easy, straightforward thing that most people do across the board, an introduction, which is talking about why this is a political issue, why you're talking about it, why what you're doing is relevant, which is going to be the introduction you would have written for any essay ever in the history of essays. The second part is going to be essentially, it's going to look like a methodology for any politics, humanities, social science essay. It's going to be some sort of methodology, what you did, why you did it, why you didn't do the other thing, why this activity connects with your issue, why doing these things will help you answer the question. And the second part is going to be your methodology. In your methodology and in your introduction, obviously you're going to be use the vocabulary. It's not whether people support their governments, it's the level of legitimacy. Use the vocabulary, all right? The ability, states have more influence over, states have power. And they exert this power, hard power, soft power, right? Use the vocabulary. So you're gonna have an introduction, which is common. You're gonna have a methodology section, which is also common. And then you'll probably have about 1,000 words, maybe less than that, maybe, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 words to analyze your issue. I spoke with this person about this thing, and they said that this was true. I think that demonstrates, indicates, I don't like to use the word proof, that this theory is valid in this situation. But I spoke with this person, and they disagreed. So actually this thing might work out. So there's a liberal view of this, and there's a realist view of this. And that's probably one of the reasons why we have a difference in policies across these different parties, or a different way of approaching trying to solve this problem, for example. So you'll go back and forth and you'll have that discussion based on this theory, based on this writer, based on this key concept, based on this issue, based on this interview. These things come up. So that's generally your structure. And then that's the analysis of the issue. And then the final piece is going to be a synthesis of the issue, which is going to look a lot like a conclusion. And it will be a little longer than your one paragraph conclusion, but that's kind of how most people just split it up into 4 sections of varying lengths. Your introduction to the issue, and your introduction to the issue is worth about 4 marks. Description of your engagement is worth about 4 marks. Your analysis is worth about 6 marks. And your synthesis is going to be worth another 6 marks. So you'll adjust most people just adjust the length of each section based on how many marks, but appreciate that your analysis of the issue might begin in your introduction when you're bringing up the issue, and your synthesis might come up in your analysis. Your synthesis might also be a part of your description of your activity. So it's not just a simple word count, but that's the easiest way to organize it. Yeah.
Alan?
Yeah, I just have a question related with the vocabulary.
Sure.
For example, if we use the word power, if we use the word sovereignty, will we be required to define that?
No. If it's no, you're not going to be required to define it, but you're going to be required to use it in context and to help, and it has to be used as a part of your argument. You don't have to define hard power or soft power. That's assumed to be general knowledge. And that's, if you look at the syllabus for the course, which you can find online, it's everywhere, it's going to give you the main key concepts if you look through it. All that stuff is assumed knowledge. So if you're going to use power to save yourself the 3 words and to lead into an argument that you want to make.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mariam, I was wondering if you have a question, and I don't know if you were having or trying to speak, but I just wonder, if you don't worry, but it's Mariam Gayu I'm talking to. No, it seems not.
Yeah. You have 2,000 words. You're gonna try to make that as balanced as you can. Use the vocabulary. Whatever you do, use the vocabulary. Make the arguments. As you work on, and again, this is why it doesn't matter whether you start from your issue that you want to talk about or your activity that you want to do. Come up with a question that allows you to be interesting and be rich in your discussion. And you might change that question a million times, as you probably will do for your extended essay, just to help focus it. If you find yourself writing and you're blowing through 2,000 words, then your issue is too broad. And that's not a problem, because you still have the information, and that's what you wanted. That is the point of the exercise, to get this information. But if you blow through that, just carve out a little bit more, be more specific. Pick a theory and challenge that theory. Pick a position and challenge that position. Pick a person and challenge that person. And so you can be a bit more narrow in your focus. if you're running past 2,000 words, I don't think that's your problem so far. But that's the thing to think about at the end of it. Just try to shave off a bit by taking out the discussion of an issue, which means you can focus on the discussion of another issue.
I have a question. How is our research question supposed to look like? Like, is it kind of like the EE research question to what extent, or is it a yes or no question, or?
To what extent questions are generally more fun. It gives you a bit more space for breath. It demonstrates that you understand the breadth of the issue. But you could go with a yes or no question. What is the biggest cause of this issue in this community in 2019? You could do that. And that's really just a matter of that's a closed question. After speaking with all the stakeholders, all of these stakeholders, because you're going to limit it somewhat, then it seems like this is the cause for this issue. But, these things also come up. That might be more interesting as an open question, but it doesn't have to be. But yeah, I just like open questions. They're more interesting.
Alan?
Yeah, I have another question, and it's related with the personal engagement. The knowledge that you're taking from the interviews, does that need to be the knowledge that will be that will make the content of your essay, or you can just use that as a source but not the main source, and use books, for example, to background your arguments and so on?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. You want most of this, your arguments are supposed to be based heavily on your primary research, which is your interviews, your shadowing, your work study, your activity. Like, it's supposed to be a primary exercise activity. That's the plan. That won't be the only thing you do. So definitely looking at your theories, your writers, your research, all that stuff has to come into it. And that goes to the richness of it. But it's not, you're tilting more towards your primary research. That's the exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There may not be another time to ask questions about the engagement activity. So anything that is just going around your head, it's valid. So don't worry about thinking about, is this question pertinent or is this an intelligent question? No worries. All questions are really good now, and we want them to be taking place because Cary has experience. That's one of the things he knows about the course. He has marked these type of assessments, and we have very few people in the world actually that have taught global politics as much as Cary. So I want to take you the advantage and the opportunity, please.
Cary?
Yep.
Hello, I'm Ritsuki. I'm from Japan. And like you mentioned a while ago, and the government is planning to give out a certain amount of money to the resident in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about so there's I live in Tokyo, and I know there's certainly a certain amount of foreigners living in Tokyo as as working or as studying in the universities. And I was wondering, how are they affected by the decision making of the politics, and I want to hear your thoughts about like this idea.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the things that came up when the idea to disperse money was first brought up was what happens with domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and that's been very clear. The other thing that is controversial, maybe, is that the funds will be dispersed not to citizens, but to residents. If you are a resident, you will receive these funds, which mean that everyone here studying, everyone here working, everyone visiting with family, all of these people have access to these funds. And that causes some problems, because not everyone is your massive international student population. Japan is an international student hub. They're not really paying taxes. Does that make them eligible for this? Depends on your position on that. The other side, if they're paying quite a lot in terms of school fees and tuition, they're international students and they're contributing quite a lot of money to the economy in that way. So yes, actually, they are total economic agents in this place, so they should have access to that. That's one part. That's just about the money. There's another discussion that's happening in Japan, which is, hey, if you think earthquakes are scary when you're not getting any information where this earthquake is, what to do because you don't speak Japanese, well, this is harder, because this is so far it's been a 5-month natural disaster without very much support. The immediate fallback, the constant pull, is the government needs to provide information for foreigners who live in Japan, because they've accepted these people into Japan. And yes, that is fair. You've introduced, you've welcomed, you've accepted, quite happy for people to be here. So you have to find a way to support them. That's totally fair. The other side of that is, actually, you knew that you were moving to Japan, and Japanese is the language. You can Duolingo your way across most things. So there's also a responsibility of foreigners moving into Japan to learn Japanese. So that's there. It's that's also a valid point, that we need to learn this stuff. The other part of it is a soft power, structural violence, kind of human rights issue, because when people say the Japanese government needs to provide support for foreigners, it's the Japanese government needs to translate Japanese policy, law, structures, decisions into English. And that's not foreigners, that's just English speaking foreigners. And again, we get into a soft power issue and also a hard power issue. There's a reason why English is the language that people default to. There's a reason why we're having this discussion in English when in 20 years, China is going to be the most powerful country. So, maybe we should be studying Chinese instead. So that gets to be a bit tricky. How do you support your non-Japanese residents who want to be a part of the society, want to be a part of community, but don't speak Japanese? Japanese is one of the hardest languages to learn by design. And that's not a bad thing. It's the system of education works to build up your kanji level until you're happily sitting at between 1,000 and 2,000 kanji, and the basic bumbo and grammar attached to that. So that's fine. And if you move into a country later, there are enough social systems, there are after school programs that exist. Can everyone access those? Yes, but no. You can learn Japanese in any community center in the country. My town in Miyazaki had 10,000 people, and we had 2 Japanese classes for the 0 foreigners in my town every week, because that's just how local governments work. Every school in Japan looks exactly the same. It must have a gym, it must have a field, it must have this many classes, it must have a science lab, it must have these features. Whether you've got 6 students in a school, I had that, or whether you have 300 students in a school, I also had that. So the system is designed to support lots of things, and it does a really good job of that. But integration is more than just language, it's more than just culture, it's more than just time, it's more than just residence. How do you do something like this? And how do you provide support for something that has never happened in anyone's lifetime? Your grandparents don't remember the Spanish flu. That's the last time we ever had something like this. It's not war. We don't have an enemy. We can't see something. We can't hide from it.
So if I were,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So if I were to talk about this for my GLOPO IA topic, will that be valid?
Yeah, it would definitely be valid. And you just need to pick the point of support for foreign residents or the struggles that foreign residents have. If you isolate one of those things, is it language support? Is it cultural support? Is it cultural integration? Is it integration into a community? If you pick if you pick foreigners having a difficult time with a pandemic, it's going to be too broad. But again, if you interview a couple of people, have a couple of phone calls with your friends, ask them what their problem is, and it will come. And that will give you something to focus on, and then you can see, okay, well, how does the Japanese government provide support for foreigners for this issue? How are foreigners not receiving support on this issue? And you could narrow it down and get to that issue. But there's lots to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Again, if you have a worry about the structure, try to think of it as a paper two. If you're worried about how to do that in terms of balance and organization, concepts, facts, multiple perspectives. Yeah, if you get stuck, it's a paper two.
Yeah, the funny part is that we haven't practiced a paper two, but I think this helps also to structure a paper two when it comes to write a paper two. We have been practicing paper ones. I have shown them the type of questions of a paper two. Maybe since you are here, it's a good just time to answer, or maybe just to suggest how to approach a paper two as you have been making the analogy. That will be very useful, Cary. Thanks.
Sure. So you've done paper ones before, question 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Question 4 is your starting point, basically. It gives you a bit more space to go. It gives you a bit more space to sort of broaden out. The idea of the question 4 in a paper 1 is that you have 4 sources plus your own information, and you're going to try to make an argument using as many of all of those sources as possible. Your paper 2 gives you a bit more flexibility, but with that flexibility, it gets a little bit messy because there are no sources. You bring your own perspectives, you bring your own case studies to this issue, and you're trying to get multiple perspectives, source A, B, C, D, and your own. But you're bringing those perspectives. So you may not need to use 5 different arguments. You can probably do this with 3, depending on how you approach this. So your first thing is trying to get multiple perspectives and answering the question. I think the most interesting question that you get to answer is slightly semantic. What is multiple? Multiple either means two or it means more than two. And depending on how you translate it, that's going to be your issue. The richness of it comes from having more than two arguments. So it's not just a debate. It's not a pro and a con, a yes or no, a liberal versus realist view. You've got the multiplicity of perspectives make it richer, make it more interesting. And that's where this gets fun. And it's why you want to have more than two subjects or more than two activities or more than two things. So you can have another perspective. Or if you have two, then bring your history, bring your context, bring your previous knowledge. So that's really where that's where you're going in this. If you have two ideas, use two ideas.
I'm just sharing the screen with questions of paper 2 related with development. So you keep talking and they can see what.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. This is good stuff. Yeah. One of the fun places, and you asked about if you need the definitions. One of the fun things that helps with creating multiple perspectives in something like this is where the definitions become really interesting, not in terms of spending time defining these concepts, but taking the different conceptual understandings of it. Development is really rich, and everything you do about development gives you some idea of human development, economic development, sustainable development, terrestrial development, cultural development. You have so many different understandings of this. You don't have to define human development every time, but if you approach the idea that harmful environmental factors represent the greatest threat to successful development. Do harmful environmental factors threaten environmental development? Probably. Sustainable development? Yeah. Human development? In the short term, probably not. In the long term, yes. Economic development? Well, that's probably a no. Definitely not in the short to medium term. That's why we keep doing it. So with these different understandings of the concepts, we'll have different places that we can go with our answers. And that's where we get this multiplicity, these multiple perspectives from. This is where we get the richness. Actually, if we look at short term or long term, then we'll have a different answer to successful development. But that also relates to why we're developing. And Samuel's going to be very disappointed with my shallow economic perspective, but if we focus on economic development, we should be able to create jobs. From those jobs, get tax revenue, and then with that tax revenue, we can build schools and hospitals, which will help us with human development. That's a very shallow way of looking at it. On the other side, if we decide to invest more in schools and hospitals, then we'll have a healthier, more intelligent population, which will then do more fun, interesting things in the workforce and create new businesses and do them for longer because they're healthy. And then we will have jobs revenue and we can create a tax base and we can create that. And that's a simple, binary, very shallow view on looking at the idea of development. But depending on what you think development should be, people or business, then you already have two perspectives. Now, if we apply that perspective to something like realism, then does that lead you closer to economic development, or does realism lead you closer to human development? Is that different with Marxism? Is that different with liberalism? Is that different with feminism? So you're bringing the perspectives yourself based on everything that you've studied. And that's why this development question quickly becomes a power question. The development question quickly becomes a human rights question. If we're looking at whose rights, whose development are we supporting or not? You live in British Columbia and you were all at the state capitol protesting a development issue, which was a human rights issue. which was a conflict issue, which was a power issue. But you're answering it from the focus of development, but you're still going to need that information on power. You'll still need that information on all the other units. And they'll all come to you by the time you have to write these massive papers. So doing them one at a time doesn't matter. But this is where that multiple perspective comes in. But instead of paper one, where you're given the perspective to use, paper two is you. You have them, they're in your head. And the worst case scenario is that you will have two presentations and an engagement activity, or you'll have one engagement activity and a whole year to study. So you'll have guaranteed enough case study material to answer the questions in case you completely freeze. But that's not going to be the case because you're already reading and being aware of what's happening in the world. So that's the introduction. That's how I'd approach a paper two. Multiple perspectives, use of case studies, different ways of looking at the question and trying to get the different answers presented in some way.
Thank you, Cary. And you will have chances to work on practice IB questions when you come back anyway. So this is very useful. Thank you, Cary. So I think we should start wrapping up. Unless there are any other questions, I will ask Cary to just make a closure here.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could get Cary's email address just in case we have any other questions that we could ask. If he would be willing to share.
Yeah, I'm cool. I'll send it to Samuel and we'll figure it out. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but the IB is a really interesting thing, and this is one of the places where you get to be you and creative and be passionate and connect with something that has meaning. Use it. Absolutely use it. If you get stuck, at least you'll be doing something fun that is interesting that gets you excited. Use it for what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Cary. I appreciate a lot your time. If you're in Japan right now, are you there right now?
Yeah, I am. It's great.
Oh, so yeah, I know you and Ritsuki are really, I think, very late at night right now.
Yeah, wow, yes.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing this almost 2 hours. I also want to thank each of you, the ones I'm seeing here, William, Megia, Alan, Giovanni, and Racim, and Elena, and Catherine, Maria, Ruhan, Linnea, Agnes, Antonio in Brazil, Myril on the other side of the world, and Hera, Alex, JP, Jillian, Ritsuki, Mariam, and Maha. I just want to mention your names because we hardly had a chance to actually see each other, and I have been missing you in the classroom as well. So we're almost wrapping up with the year. We still have a class next Thursday, as you know. I'm planning to make a short, maybe 1 hour session talking about inequalities, giving you a little bit more of the technical vocabulary and maybe also a way of measuring inequalities. So you will have a little bit that more, because I saw that some of you want to use that in your engagement. We didn't really go through that. So I'm gonna use that time, and then we can just wrap up the whatever questions you have about the term. We may have a little assessment just for finishing the assessment to me as a teacher and assessment to the system that we use in terms of the Zoom and all these online, resources. We don't know what's gonna happen in September yet. There are some scenarios. We may still have some classes like this, but it may not happen, so we don't really know. But we would like to know how did it go this term with this, okay? And yeah, so if anyone has anything else that you would like to talk with me personally, we can do it by email. We can set up also a meeting via Zoom. But yes, don't hesitate, please, to contact me anytime. And Cary, I again thank you very much. Maybe you want to finish having some final words, and then we are done.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate this. Yeah, it's great to learn with people. Thanks.
But thanks a lot. You actually were the one who approached me, and I really appreciate your help. And yeah, so we'll keep seeing you guys next week. And for those who have economics, we'll see you a little bit later today who can make it. Otherwise, I will record a session and we can just talk about the economics later. So take care, guys. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cary,
Questions after everyone leaves?
Yeah, Mejia, you want to make it directly to me?
Yeah, about course and about economics, because I wasn't able to attend classes. So I was just wondering if we are going to have in economics and global politics some kind of assignments to finish the year, and how are we getting grades for that? Say we wrote about the country's development we choose. Remembers that one? Yeah. I was just wondering about that and how we are just finishing the years.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I was going to mention that a little bit next class about how to be assessed in terms of what I'm taking as you know, for your marks. It's been tricky because my original plan was to have a paper, and based on that paper, I will give you a number, you know, an IB grade. But we don't really have, you know, the system for me, I think, is not the best if we do a paper online. Some of you are not even able to connect. Some people, I haven't seen them for 2 months right now because they are not able to connect. They may not have internet. So it's a little bit unfair just to base grades on a particular paper. So what I will use is what you have submitted. You have submitted 3 works. One is the country assignment. The other one is the letter to your grandchildren. If you haven't done that, maybe you want to check on the emails that I have sent. Otherwise, is to write a letter to the grandchildren's generation related with the COVID pandemic. So please send me an email if you didn't get it, and then I will resend you the task to you.
Yeah, I think I just missed. I haven't seen a letter for grandchildren. Okay, I'm just gonna go through. Yeah. Because we're getting so many messages, so it's possible that I just missed one.
Yeah, I totally understand, and I know you guys, you've been overwhelmed sometimes with lots of emails and lots of information from different sources and courses. So I'm totally aware, because on my side is the same. I receive emails from house parents, and then TAI, and then faculty, and then students. So sometimes you miss emails. So I'm totally aware of that. I won't really penalize people in terms of marks, because I don't have a particular marking scheme right now. What I will do is, in the report, I will put these assignments, you know, the IB question that you made, the letter to your grandchildren, and the country assignment. I will try to put it as achieve or not achieve, or presented or not presented thing in a narrative. So what did you do? How did you engage into that task to be sent? But I'm not gonna give numbers. That's what I cannot give, because some of you may not have it being even able to submit it. So again, I'm unable to put a number on someone who had not had the opportunity to submit something on time, for example. So what I will give you is feedback on those, and I will use the IB grade that we used last term, okay? Now that IB grade doesn't mean really anything so far, because that is not sent to universities, that is not sent to anyone, but it's just for you to have a grade. Next term is when we are gonna be assessing you again, trying to build an IB grade for universities, you know, a predicted grade. So that's gonna be once you come back in September. So right now, yeah, go ahead, Maria.
How about economics? Is it the same?
Sure. No, economics is different. In economics, we have done examinations. That's the thing. We have done some examinations here, which has helped me a lot to have an achieve grade. So what I'm thinking in economics is that I'm going to use just the ones that we have done so far. You did 2 even before going, no, 1 before going away. And you have done 2 more last term. So you also send your IAs, which I'm still marking. I haven't begun, but I'm gonna use the IA as, again, part of your task to be considered as something that you have done. I didn't think about making a formal IB examination to complete this term, but yeah, it's different than global politics because I already have numbers on economics.
Okay.
Okay. If you haven't been able to join all the econ classes, again, don't worry about that affecting your grades. But I will say try to look at the past Zoom sessions because the contents are the ones that I need you to make sure that you understand. Because when you come back next year, I'm going to try to assume that you have already understood that. And maybe once you come back, we will make a short summary, maybe one session of question and answer to make sure that we got everything. But I cannot repeat the topics that we have seen next term. We won't have time. Okay.
It's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully the session of today, I know you and William cannot attend, I know. So I was thinking either to repeat it during the weekend or next week, but that will mean that you need to allocate at least 1 hour and a half of your time extra. I'm not really sure if I will do that. Otherwise, you for sure will have the recorded session and the lessons that I put on YouTube anyway, so you can just check them. So depending how it goes, because it's a very important session, that's what I want to make sure that that topic that we're learning today is about macroeconomic models, and so I want to make sure that you get that class, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so keep in touch, yeah, and take care, guys. Bye-bye.